believe it or not, I am an introvert. And everybody who knows me would say, oh, but I am.
You just are that square peg trying to fit into that round hole.
So when I saw the sign at the Harbor Post Office for auditions, I went, I'm going to give that a try.
We like to wear makeup, dress in funny clothes, and dance around in the dark. And if that isn't your idea of fun, then there's the door.
We want to talk to you about the Chetco Pelican Players,
how they got started,
how they struggled,
and how they persevered.
In this series, we're taking a look at CPP's 33-year history of live theater in the Brookings-Harbor Community. And we're going to go all the way back to the beginning.
To 1988, along with the people who lived through it. I'm Caitlin Temple.
And I'm Jason Liddell.
And this is The Green Room.
Episode 1. A Pelican in a Top Hat. 1988 to 1990.
It probably goes without saying, but the world looked a little bit different in the late 80s.
Michael Jackson was topping the Billboard charts.
The Berlin Wall was still standing.
And a ragtag group of actors in Brookings-Harbor had a dream to start a theater.
My full name is Mary Ann Traylor, and I've been involved with CPP since the fall of 1988.
Well, my name is Michael Patrick Moran, and I've been involved since, the beginning before it was CPP.
Mike and Mary Ann are some of the longest-serving active members of CPP who still live in the area.
I am currently the president of the board. I've been a board member off and on many years.
I've been president 8 times, and for the last 16 to 17 years that we've been in our new location, I've built sets and run tech on every single production that we've done. And I'm still on the board of directors. And I can't get out of it.
And Mike will claim otherwise, but I think he's got a pretty good memory of the old days.
Originally started, I was working at Curry Radio with another disc jockey, Bill Dwinell. We had done theater when we were in high school and college and hadn't really done much for about 10 years. And we were doing fundraisers around the community and decided to do a fundraiser to help out different needy organizations. So Bill decided to do this melodrama, which we did again, which name I can't remember now. But we'll go back and look it up.
We did look it up. The name of that very first play was a melodrama called The Return of Deadwood Dick. It was set in the 1890s in the Black Hills of South Dakota, and it starred none other than Mike Moran.
And so by the time I came up here, I had already had about 20 years in theater almost. And so had Bill Dwinell, and we found Leanne McCurley and Nancy Carson, who was Nancy Pierce at the time, and Bea and Andy Drago, who were an older couple that had done theater down in the Los Angeles area for years. And Bea was a professional singer, and Andy was a maintenance guy and set builder. And we all just kind of fell in together and felt like we needed to do a show. And so we produced this melodrama at the Elks Lodge, which went very well for a couple of weekends. And we raised money and donated it to the groups. And after that, Leanne McCurley, along with myself and Bea and Andy Drago and a few other people, decided, well, why don't we start up what theater company there used to be in this town? And that's kind of how it started.
But if they were going to be a group with their own identity, they had to settle on a name of their own as well.
First, they were Laughter Unlimited, which was the name Deadwood Dick was produced under.
And then for a while, they tried out the Mill Pond Players. That might sound silly, but years ago, there actually was a mill pond here, where Fred Meyer grocery store is now.
And finally, 2 of the original members, Chuck and Lila Moore, had an idea and they pitched it to the group.
I thought Mill Pond would work well. Chuck and Lila Moore pushed harder than anybody for Chetco Pelican Players, and they owned an RV park out in Harbor. And so I said to them, well, if you're so stuck on pelicans, because the Pelican Bay thing is kind of further in Harbor anyway than in Brookings, I said, why don't you call your RV park, the Harbor Pelican Perch RV park? They said, well, that's stupid. I'm going, well, why do you want to name our theater that? But the board agreed anyway, and I wasn't on the board at the time. So I said, fine, go ahead. Call yourself the Chetco Pelican Players.
For years, the logo with the title of the Players was Chetco Players with a picture of a pelican in the middle. So a lot of people didn't realize that we weren't the Chetco Players.
The next thing you know, we had a pelican with a top hat.
Yeah.
Just downplay that whole pelican thing.
So, whether Mike liked it or not, every show after that's been produced under the group's new name, the Chetco Pelican Players.
And that's about the time that a new face joined the group, Mary Ann Traylor, the current president of CPP. In the fall of 1988, she was new in the area, and she tried out for the first show CPP put on under their new name, a melodrama called Lily the Felon's Daughter.
I played the mother in Lily the Felon's Daughter. Yeah, we did it at the Elks Lodge, and it was great. My favorite line was,
And like a lot of the founding members, Marianne also had a background in community theater.
I had been doing theater since I was about 10 years old and did a lot of theater in high school and college, and a lot of drama, comedy, and musical theater in those years, but never a melodrama. In all my years of being on stage, I'd never done a melodrama. So when I saw the sign at the Harbor Post Office for auditions, I went, I'm going to give that a try.
Melodramas like The Return of Deadwood Dick and Lily the Felon's Daughter were CPP's bread and butter for its first year or two of operation.
Now, if you've never seen a melodrama, it's kind of a whole genre of theater unto itself. They're typically set in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and actors will often stop what they're doing to talk directly to the audience.
And audience members aren't expected to be quiet during a melodrama. In fact, they're encouraged to cheer for the heroes and outright boo the villains whenever they come on stage.
And subtlety is forbidden. If you're not overacting, then you're not doing it right.
So we asked Mike and Marianne just what was it about melodramas that appealed to them and to the community back then?
It's a lot more forgiving of errors. I mean, when you see a drama or a musical or a comedy and the actors on stage, somebody forgets their line, it's noticeable, and the audience kind of goes, ugh, for those forms of theater. But with melodrama, it's almost part of the act.
At one point, it actually did become part of the show. Mike remembers one melodrama, before CPP found their home, where one of the stars of the show, the villain, had some trouble remembering his lines.
And remember during the show, which people got to think was part of the show, we were having to cue him through a loud whisper from off stage. He would kind of stop, he'd be talking, and then he'd just stop, and you knew he was stuck. So somebody would say, don't go down by the railroad tracks. Yeah. He'd say, and don't go down by the railroad tracks. And it got to be like everybody thought it was part of the show.
Well, melodrama is one of the few theater forms that you can get away with that. And it's hilarious, and it works.
Mike said it was pretty clear to them then, too. Melodramas were what the community seemed to want. Whatever the reason, people seemed to crave the simple plots and campy humor of that kind of theater.
The first 5 shows we did were all melodramas. Yeah. Because I was kind of pushing for it, because in Coquille they have the Sawdusters Theater, which is a melodrama theater. And people seemed to like to come out and have light entertainment. I had done melodrama in my younger years in high school and stuff, and said, they're easy shows to produce, they're lighthearted. And people like B. Drago, There's something in melodramas called oleo acts, because melodramas originally only about an hour long were written before the turn of the century. And so to add a little more girth to them and a little more time on stage, you had oleo acts, which is in between the acts. People would come in and sing or do juggling or whatever back in the old days. So B was very instrumental in being part of that, along with Lila Moore, and would set up these oleo acts for these different productions.
So oleo acts are pretty open-ended. They had dancing.
One of the oleo acts that we had that was real popular was there was a group of senior ladies that were tap dancers.
There was singing.
Actually, only once was I in an oleo, and that was along with Mary Matlock. And she and I dressed up as lounge singers, chanteuses, and in sparkly costumes and, feather boas. And we sang.
But they also got a bit more creative sometimes. Should we tell them about the Belly Button Brigade?
Oh yeah, we have to tell them about the Belly Button Brigade.
That was Lila Moore.
Yeah.
Who came up with that, who had seen the act done someplace else. And if you look at the pictures, it involves a body wearing a huge hat that covers over their shoulders and covers their entire head, and they used their bellies and their belly buttons and did makeup on their chest to make it look like a big face. Mm-hmm. And came out and...
they dance.
Yeah.
They just wiggle around and have fake arms that would just flap, and they dance. It was hilarious. I mean, I was familiar with that type of entertainment from my childhood in Washington State. So when I came down here, I said, well, it must be universal.
But no matter how fun and flexible melodramas can be, everyone agreed. They needed their own space.
So we moved to the Grange Hall, looking for a home still.
Well, we'd always been looking for a permanent home.
Groups like the Grange and the Elks had been generous in letting them use their spaces, but they just weren't set up to be a full-time theater.
The Grange stage was like 15 by 20. You couldn't get much smaller. And so it really limits the size of productions you can do because of set changes and the like. So we had to find shows that had very few set changes. And then Security Bank decided to move from one shopping center to across the street and opened up the end of this building and had nothing going in there because it was kind of set up to be a bank. And Lee McCurley went in, knew most of the business people in town, and somehow we negotiated this contract to take over this building and build it into a theater.
So Leanne McCurley Hinkle is something of a CPP legend. And we're going to bring the legend herself into this conversation after a quick break.
Hey guys, we're recording this at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. The theater shut its doors mid-production in late March, and we haven't been able to safely put on a live show at the theater since. On the one hand, it's given everyone time to get in touch with us for interviews and to explore our history, but we really miss our audiences. We want to be around in the future to keep bringing you another 30 years of live theater and the arts in Curry County.
Your support means everything to us. There's never been a better year to send a small donation to CPP if you can spare it, even if it's just to renew your membership for 2021. You can reach out to the Playhouse on Facebook or give Marianne a call at 541-661-4323 to see how you can help. Okay, that's it. Let's get back to the show. So this is where Leanne Hinkle, formerly known as Leanne McCurley, comes in.
Well, I'm Leanne McCurley Hinkle, and I've been involved in theater for 50 years.
She'd been involved in those founding melodramas too. She moved away a little over a decade ago, but she called us from her current home in Eastern Oregon to tell us a bit more about CPP's search for a performance space to call home.
And then at the shopping center was the community bank building that went defunct And then we looked at that and talked to the landlord for about a year, trying to convince him we could turn it into a theater, and it was sitting vacant. So he finally agreed, John McNutt finally agreed to let us try. So we got the rent down to $600, and he said we could try for 6 months at $600 and see if we could even make it. He doubted that we could.
And they made it. Despite all doubts, they managed to maintain that lease for more than 15 years.
And Carl Herman and Andy Drago went to work right away, remodeling it and putting a stage up.
Everyone pitched in. Even Mary Ann, who, back then, towed her 8-month-old daughter, Jen Trailer, to demolition parties.
Oh, I love destruction. Tearing out the old tables and counters and everything, and helping to make the bank into a theater.
Okay, so new baby or not, I guess no one was exactly twisting her arm back then.
I was part of the group that was tearing out the bank stuff and putting in the theater stuff. I was on the the bucket brigade for bringing in the seats, and we had lots of fun.
Got to remember, this was a bank building, so we had to take out all the teller windows and everything.
And it had ceilings high enough where we eventually built a fly system into it, so we could fly walls. We could fly back walls. We could fly 3 of them. So you could do big set changes.
Before we put lights on the staircase, and people would fall down the stairs.
Oh, there was that. You gotta understand, this wasn't a rickety building. This was a nice bank.
Yeah.
It was all carpeted and stuff.
Yeah, the stairs were carpeted. We didn't have to put in the carpeting for the quiet like we did here. It was already carpeted. And because it was 2-story, like when we did Man of La Mancha, and we're all supposed to be down in a dungeon, we were able to put in a ramp that led to the 2nd story of the theater, which was the way in and out of the dungeon.
And so we took the bank building and converted it into a theater in approximately 2 months' time.
So to take a space like that, built for business, a bank complete with teller windows, computer rooms, and a vault, and to turn it into a performing arts center in the span of a summer, that was a pretty big accomplishment.
And that's something you gotta celebrate. So they did what any group would do after a victory like that. They threw a party, a cocktail attire gala, and they invited the entire community.
Nancy Carson and her group and a lot of individual board members, we made all this finger food and we had champagne. We had about 150 people in there to celebrate, and since the floor was flat, we really could do a real grand an event to celebrate the opening of the theater. We had a real fancy fur coat, black tie affair for our opening gala, and that became the inspiration of the PACKY Awards, which was the Performing Arts Center Crazy Year Awards is what we called them, PACKYs, and that's how they developed.
That's right. That's the basis of the theater's PACKY Awards, the annual tradition we've kept for over 30 years. I remember a few years ago, we just had our PACKY Awards ceremony, and a week or 2 later, I opened the local paper to see a pretty critical letter to the editor, questioning why the theater, a nonprofit, would hold an annual party like that. It said it seemed like the Chetco Pelican Players were spending valuable time and money to pat themselves on the back, and that they couldn't see the benefit in it. And I've got to admit, I wondered about that myself at the time. Was there really any benefit to hosting an annual gala? But after listening to Leanne's story, and just how much work went into finding a place to call home, I think I understand it a lot better now. To the founding members especially, it's not about vanity. It's about thanking the theater family for all the work they've put in throughout the year. That's the thing about community theater. It doesn't exist without all the members of this community coming together to bring dreams to life and create something out of nothing. It's their way of celebrating all the good that community theater is capable of, not just for themselves, but for others as well.
Believe it or not, I am an introvert. And everybody who knows me would say, oh, but I am. And I do theater to get myself out of the house and get myself around other people and join this other family that I have. So it helps the community in building a sense of family. This theater family were the first friends I made of my own in this town when we moved here.
There's nothing like the commitment of having this age difference where you can have, again, someone from 8 to 80 all in the same show, all working towards the same common goal.
Just a way of connecting a community together and building confidence, building a social network that will always be there.
And if 2020 has taught us anything, the networks we forge, together or apart, they can mean everything. And community theater is just one other way to do that.
On the next episode of The Green Room, we're going to look back at the 90s. Every performance space has its pros.
I miss that particular theater to this day. I mean, there was so much that you could do with it.
And it has its cons.
But when we opened the outside doors to get in, we had nothing but 4 feet of water flow out.
And you'd be performing on stage and we have a sudden downpour and nobody could hear anything.
But a permanent home also meant they could start trying new things.
And after we did about 5 melodramas, I pushed the board and said, let's try a musical.
And I thought, wow, talk about jumping into the deep end of the pool.
The players had found their home. So how did they adjust to having a space of their own? We'll find out, along with the people who lived through it. Would you, if you remember, would you feel comfortable singing a verse or so?
Oh, sure. How much is that baby in the window? The one with the golden curls. How much is that baby in the window? I do hope that baby's a girl.